Opinion on Sky News Australia starts now. Live, this is Outsiders.
Well, good morning, Australia. It's not a good morning. It's a terrifying morning. We've had the horror yesterday of Bondi Junction and the stabbing, the deaths. And this morning we wake up to the news that terror again is in the skies over Israel, with Iran sending drones and potentially missiles straight at Israel. This is not a great day. It's a dark and disturbing day in Sydney and in the rest of the nation. The horrific attacks yesterday at Bondi Junction shopping centre, we all saw those awful images, and there have been various commentary being made about that. We'll have the whole show devoted to looking at both what happened there and what is happening currently in Israel with the attack of the drones from Iran. We'll get back to that soon. We'll be speaking to people about that. It's a horrific day, but we'll get through it, all of us together. We learnt the name of the attacker who was shot dead by the police, thank goodness. 40-year-old Joel Couchy was his name. He was known to the police in Queensland, but a month or so ago he had relocated to Sydney. 5 women and 1 man were killed by this piece of human yesterday, including the mother of a baby who is being treated in hospital. This was the Deputy Police Commissioner of New South Wales just a few minutes ago describing what the police knew about this man.
I can tell you that a 40-year-old man from Queensland, Joel Couchy, has been identified as the offender in this matter. There is still, to this point, nothing that we have, no information we have received, no evidence we have recovered, no intelligence that we have gathered that would suggest that this was driven by any particular motivation, ideology or otherwise. Very clearly to us at this stage it would appear that this is related to the mental health of the individual.
And here now is what the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, had said just a couple of minutes ago.
The events of yesterday have shocked the nation. Australians are waking up to try to deal with the shock and trauma that will come with what has occurred, with violent actions that are unspeakable and really just beyond comprehension. People going about their Saturday afternoon shopping should be safe, shouldn't be at risk. But tragically, we saw a loss of life and people will be grieving for loved ones today. We also know there are many people still in hospital dealing with a recovery, and our thoughts and prayers are with them.
So we know the name, Joel Couchy was the knifeman, but the people who will be remembered out of this, he will long be forgotten. The people who will be remembered were the brave Amy Scott, the policewoman, the photo of the policewoman there. What an iconic photo of her. She bravely ran towards the killer and shot him dead. And equally and tragically brave was, of course, Ashley Good and her baby. Ashley Good threw the baby into the arms of 2 men, 2 brothers who were there as she was dying from her knife wounds to save the baby. She later died in hospital. Here in Outsiders this morning, Rita Panahi and Liz Storer. James is off in the States. It's an awful day, Liz and Rita. We also have the news that Israel is under attack from drones and potentially missiles. The RAF is apparently helping there in the skies above Israel. So, Rita, first of all, your thoughts just on what happened yesterday in Bondi Junction?
Well, horrific day. I think just Australians utterly shocked. We all go to Westfield shopping centres where it's a setting we're all familiar with. You go there with your family expecting to be 100% safe, and to have this horrific attack unleashed on innocent people, to have a baby stabbed in its pram and then the mother targeted as well, is just something you would never expect to happen in any civilised corner of the world, anywhere in the world. And you mentioned the police inspector there, Amy Scott, who neutralised this killer. She's a hero today, but so is Ash Good, because
Absolutely.
from what we understand, her very last act was to save her baby. So despite being horrifically injured and eventually succumbing to those injuries, she handed her baby over to two brothers who stepped in and used garments from the shops to compress the child's wounds. And hopefully that has helped that baby survive. The baby, we understand, has undergone surgery, still in a very serious condition. But that, I think, is the part of this that you just have the most trouble comprehending, how a little baby could be targeted, and what that family is going through, how they're going to survive this. So, yeah, it really is horrific. Well, what we've learned today is that the family of the knifeman is cooperating with police. So that's an update we got today. He had possession of a storage facility, so I'm not sure if that means he was living in that storage facility or he's only been in Sydney for around a month, moved from the Brisbane area in Queensland. So we're starting to get a little bit more detail, but what we don't know is why. Why did he do this? We don't have anything in terms of what motivated this attack. We've just got to wait and learn that. But what you learn from it, what actions we can take to prevent something like this happening, I don't know.
Liz?
Just unspeakable. Who has words for situations like this? You really don't. You just don't know what to say other than to pray for the families and friends. Waking up this morning, I remembered how it feels when you've lost someone tragically, and waking up, it's like it just happened all over again, if they've slept at all. It's so heartwarming, the heroism of, as you say, Rita, Ash Good and Amy Scott, but also the men we saw in some of the footage risking life and limb to run toward terrified screams, not knowing what they might face, but just everyday civilians running toward this madman. One was brandishing a plastic chair at some point, just doing whatever they could to fend this animal off. And we do know that he isn't sound of mind. That's something that we learnt from the police this morning. Maybe they would have us believe this is some sort of, Martin Bryant situation where the only explanation at the end of the day will be that this guy was crazy. He was not sound of mind. They said he's had mental health issues. And of course, if you've had a history with the police, as we know he has, hence he was known to them already, one would assume that they do know what kind of criminal history he has, hence they know him already. Dearly wish those details could be released, but obviously as the investigation is ongoing, details are always limited at these points in investigations. We have been reassured several times now by the police that this was not an act of terrorism whatsoever, but it does make me wonder. I mean, I'm sure plenty of people are wondering if it was. I mean, by now they would have read the guy's text, they would have known his search history, etc. and so on. you would question the wisdom of telling people, wouldn't you? Because given tensions are so high right now with regard to many an issue on the world stage and here at home, it would be much like dropping a match into
I disagree.
a powder keg.
I think we're a civilised country. We expect honesty and transparency from our police force. I think if they knew something and they were deliberately withholding it, I don't think that would be something that would be acceptable. So I genuinely
I'm not saying it's acceptable.
No,
but
I'm not saying...
We can speculate all we like.
I don't think they know anything
The
yet.
reality is we need to know what did drive this killing. People were absolutely terrified. You can call it whatever you want to call it. The people of Bondi Junction were in a terror situation yesterday, running in terror for their lives. The acts of bravery which Liz and Rita referred to are astonishing. That's the great Aussie character, old Bollard man and the brothers and the chairman and the wonderful Amy Scott. That's the Australia, and we mentioned Ashley Good, the tragic bravery there. That's the Australia that we all love, and that's the Australia that is resilient and fights on. Just another couple of words from Anthony Albanese about responses from leaders around the world.
I've received messages overnight from the leaders, including from President Biden, Prime Minister Sunak, Prime Minister Luxon, and others in our region as well, expressing their condolences to Australians, and I thank them for their thoughts and prayers that we've received.
And now let's go to someone who was there yesterday. Kenny Heatley is there now. Let's have a chat to Kenny about, you're over there now. Tell us about it, Kenny.
Rowan, guys, good morning. It's a strange feeling being here this morning. I just want to take you through the scene about what is happening here outside Westfield Bondi Junction right now. This is the large media contingent that we have here. It is currently sort of fenced off. Grosvenor Street across the road is the entrance to the Westfield Bondi Junction. There's a large truck as well that's just in the last 10 minutes or so parked up. Their traffic controllers, they're going to be setting up bollards and fences, no doubt to keep the public out, because the entire block is basically blocked off right now. And when I say it's a strange feeling being here, it's just because you realise what is inside, that the bodies are still inside at the moment. There are body transport vehicles that have arrived here this morning, and we understand that at some point through this morning those bodies are going to be removed depending on what is happening with the crime scene. Just follow me down here as well. Members of the public have been beginning to lay tributes and flowers here, and no doubt this is the spot that is going to grow quite a lot throughout the day. We also had ministers, including Police Minister Yasmin Catley, and also the Acting Premier Penny Sharp, lay flowers here as well, including the Waverley Mayor Paula Masalos, who is just here at the moment. She's on the phone. If she gets off, I'll try and have a chat to her. But we are getting that information gradually coming through. Something that wasn't touched on and that really in a huge amount in the New South Wales Police press conference that started at 8:30 this morning local time was the condition of the people in hospital. Now, last night it was reported, they said it was 8 people who were transported to hospital. Well, we now have information that is now 12 people related to this incident in hospital. They range from serious to stable conditions. Harriet, the little baby, 9-month-old, is in a serious but stable condition in Sydney's Children's Hospital. So that's an update. There were 3 people from Westfield who were here that presented themselves. They weren't transported by ambulance. Now, we don't know exactly whether they were directly attacked by Joel Couchy or whether they were in shock and 12 hours later they presented themselves to hospital. We don't know. And that information will most likely flow, as well as the identities of the further victims. So, guys, it's a very sombre scene here this morning. There's lots of people just hanging around. Paula Masalos, you're live on Sky News. I'm Kenny Heatley. This is your community. You're the mayor. How are you feeling this morning?
Still pretty shattered. I mean, when I heard the news yesterday, I was in complete shock, and it hasn't abated this morning. And I know that I've been getting a lot of messages from people who also have incredible disbelief. However, having said that, heralding the incredible heroism of the people who were in there helping other people, the shop assistants, the people who were in there in the shopping centre helping people who are injured. It is still, though, pretty nerve-wracking because this is a safe place. I mean, people come here because they know it's safe. Parents allow their kids into the shopping centre because to hang there, it's a meeting place for young people. So this is what's made the disbelief and the shock even worse.
How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It is pretty awful because I know people who are in there. I think the main thing is, though, that the community is pulling together. As you can see, there are floral tributes already, and that's really important so that people can express their grief, and we'll be working and coordinating with the state government to provide services, counselling services. So they've been amazing. The most gratifying thing, though, is that the perpetrator is now out of action. The community is safe, and we have reassurances from the police that he was on his own and it was not ideologically driven. So people, importantly, know they can come to Bondi Junction and be safe. It's not something that will reoccur.
Well, not right now. It's all fenced off at the moment and probably will be for a while. But Paula, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, we'll throw it back to you here. We'll be providing plenty of updates on what's happening here throughout the morning. But certainly, as I said, a strange feeling to be here and certainly a sombre mood here this morning.
Kenny Heatley, thanks so much. And I must say, you and Laura and the rest of the Sky team did a sensational job yesterday afternoon. Well done to all of you from the Sky News team there. Let's have a look at the two brothers I mentioned. This is an absolute tragedy. But Dr. Ashley Good, who was killed, literally threw her baby Harriet that was just mentioned into the arms of the two brothers, and here they are after the attack, still clearly in shock.
Just holding the baby and trying to compress the baby, and same with the mother, trying to compress the blood from stopping and calling ambulance.
Extraordinary, Rita.
Absolutely, and that's. You get another shock there for hearing from Kenny and learning that the bodies are still there. They're still in the shopping centre.
Yeah, that was shocking.
They're going to be transported shortly out of there. So, and these stabbings occurred throughout the centre. I think there was a woman who died in the Chanel store. There was stabbings reportedly, JB Hi-Fi, Cotton On. Just again, the familiarity we have, I think, just brings it home. This could have been anyone. It could have been your loved ones there going about a regular Saturday and having some knife-wielding miscreant who was hell-bent on inflicting maximum damage. And you do wonder if it wasn't for the actions of the Bollard man, for example, who stopped him proceeding up the stairs to the next level, or most importantly, the Inspector Amy Scott, who in the end shot him dead. How much worse this would be today. As bad as it is, it could be even worse if it wasn't for the actions of those people. So
exactly. Now the police do insist that this was not terror-related, but they won't tell us. They don't know the motivation of the killer. I think that's the question a lot of people are going to want some very serious answers to. The New South Wales police hierarchy have come in for criticism in recent times over various issues, but the bravery of the officers themselves, particularly Amy Scott, but so many of the officers who turned up yesterday, is undeniable, and that's the New South Wales police force we can all be very proud of. The hierarchy do have to come up with some proper explanations, because there are many suspicions. Worse than that were the fears that were running around yesterday in Bondi Junction. As I mentioned before, it is a very large Jewish community there. The synagogue is only a few yards away from Westfield itself, across the road. That's the central synagogue, the biggest synagogue in Sydney. It's the one where, for example, when Benjamin Netanyahu was out here a few years ago, I was privileged to go along to the service at Central Synagogue there. So, of course, while this rampage was happening yesterday, you can imagine the terror, particular of all the shoppers, of all the people who were listening to it, but in particular of members of the Jewish community. And we'll be chatting to Dr. David Adler later in the program about that side of it. But I repeat, the police have said there is no ideological motivation, religious, political or otherwise, as far as they are concerned.
There have been reports in the media which I'm not sure it's a good idea yet to, again, be running with theories that are yet unfounded, but there have been theories in the media and mainstream media about the disproportionate number of women who are victims here. Yeah. So out of the 6 who have been murdered, 5 were women. So there is a theory that's being discussed about whether women were being targeted. But again, I think it's too early to jump to that conclusion. There could be other reasons why women were disproportionately impacted. Obviously, women being a knife attack, women aren't as strong, as fast, and there could be other explanations for that. So I think we've just got to wait when it comes to that until we've got a bit more.
The questions have to be answered, and the police hierarchy know that they must answer those questions.
And I think
properly.
One of the biggest questions, certainly I've seen it asked also across socials repeatedly, is if you don't know what the motive is, how can you assure us that it's definitely not this?
Absolutely.
So we don't know what it is, but it's definitely not A or B.
One of the reasons, if you read the police commissioner's explanation for... I thought that didn't really lend much weight to that explanation because she spoke about how he acted alone. And it's not ideal. Well, there are people who act alone who are ideologically motivated. So acting alone. Then
there was a strange phrase about terrorist ideation or something or other, which all sounded like police jargon. As I said, the police, New South Wales police hierarchy, I stress hierarchy and administration, the upper echelons did not cover themselves in glory recently, and this is completely unconnected to Bondi, obviously, but recently with the Opera House protest on October 9th, and the police were very, very eager to ensure that certain words were or were not said, and that left probably not the best image for them. So we need transparency is the point here, as Rita and Liz were saying. We must have transparency. Obviously, we expect New South Wales Police to be working on that. Let's have a look at another one of the witnesses from yesterday who was there on the scene.
That's why it came also as a shock to me because you don't expect that to happen in Australia. We've got such a safe country.
And she runs back to the pram, picks up her baby, and then all I see is blood.
Trying to compress the baby, and same with the mother, trying to compress the blood from stopping.
I'm very jittery. I'm just... I don't know, man. I don't know.
And I thought Julia Bradley did a terrific job there as well. Watching that witness yesterday, you could see he was just literally in shock from the eeriness and the silence he'd walked into. It sounded like a horror movie, the way he described it, and probably worse than a horror movie indeed. We've got Andrew Reid we're going to talk to. He was one of the lifeguard witnesses as well. Let's cross over to Andrew. Andrew, g'day. You were there yesterday at Bondi. Tell us what you saw and tell us what you thought first things when you woke up this morning.
Oh, mate, what I saw was probably one of the most horrific things I think I'll hopefully ever see in my life. I was just in Maya buying a bed, and we got told that there was people being stabbed outside, and we needed to evacuate, and we went to evacuate, but they pulled the shutters down to keep everyone safe, obviously. And then as we looked out the shutters, I heard 2 gunshots around the corner, and I was like, oh, wow, this is way more serious than I thought. And And then as I looked back down to level 4, I could see a woman just bleeding profusely. And I was like, wow, I've got to get down there and help. So I went down the escalators in Maya, and then the shutter was still shut. So I asked the guy to open the shutter for me so I could go out. And I went around the escalators, and there was just multiple victims sort of spread out through the shopping centre, which was absolutely surreal to see, because you just, I've been shopping in Westfields all my life, and it's like, to see that was just... Anyway, we went to work on the first person that was already being helped by someone else, and we just sort of tried to stop some bleeding and tried to stabilise her. And then I looked over, and there was 2 police officers working on another victim, and she was in a really bad way. And we were still looking for more patients. I think the police were still looking for more attackers. So I sort of went over to try and relieve them, and I was doing CPR on this poor woman, but she was in a really bad way. And then a couple of ambulance officers arrived and helped me, and then we tried to get an airway in and stuff, and just kept working on her. But it was she was in a bad way. But then I went to go to a third victim, and as I was running towards her, I just saw this pram sitting there empty, and I was like, what is that doing here? Like, I've got 3 young kids, and I just was like, and then I went down to the third victim, and she wasn't in a great way either. So by that time, more police had arrived, more ambulance officers had arrived, and they were doing a fantastic job. And I just thought I'd sort of done enough as I can do here. And I think the first lady we treated, I think she got off okay, which I hope. I think I know her name, so I'm hoping to find out she was okay. But
well, Andrew, you are an absolute hero and an absolute legend. You're being very modest. You actually went into the fray. You refused the evacuation orders. You're a very brave man. You went into the fray to help people. You clearly did help people. That's the great Aussie spirit. It's no surprise to me that you're a Bondi lifeguard. Bondi's lucky to have you, mate. Very lucky to have you. And
mate, any of my colleagues would have done the same thing, I reckon. That's what we're trained to do. We deal with a lot of fin chops and stuff at Bondi, so we're used to, but obviously not to that extent of bleeding wise. But we know how to manage those situations. So I just used what I knew, my training from the great paramedics that train us there at Bondi. So
you're an absolute hero, mate. Rita wants to say something.
Absolutely, you're a hero to not know if there were more attackers, where the attacker was, and to go out there and expose yourself to a possible attack is astonishing bravery. You mentioned one of the women you were helping. You think she was okay. Do you know what the fate of the other 2 that you helped yesterday? And have you been getting any updates on the ones that we were hearing today? There were 12 in hospital. Have you heard anything about how they're travelling? Because there's been limited information about the people who've sustained injuries and are receiving treatment.
Yeah, I don't think the couple of the patients that I treated were very good. The first lady, I'm hoping that we managed to stop her bleeding enough. And when she left us, when she left with the paramedics, I think she was okay, but I think she needed a lot of blood. That was probably the hardest thing, I guess, was seeing how much blood loss there was. But the paramedics and the police as well, before the paramedics got there, the police were doing an incredible job, not only looking for what they thought was a second attacker, but also working on patients as well as bystanders. So there was plenty of heroes yesterday. And, I've got to give a lot of credit to that female police officer that took him down, because she definitely saved more lives, and she's so courageous. And also the guy with the bollard as well. Like, you've got to he kept him at bay for a while, which would have given more time for the police to respond and ambulances to get there, and less victims, which is what a legend. If he'd thrown that bollard and missed, that escalator was going up, and the guy was coming straight at him. And for me, mate, he was staring straight down the hole of something that could have gone horribly wrong. So let's find out who that guy is and
absolutely
give him a
Bollard man. Absolutely a Bollard medal for Bollard man. Andrew, great to chat to you. And your family, your kids can be extremely proud of their dad this morning. Thanks so much, and keep up the great work there at Bondi Beach. Thank you so much. Andrew Reid, absolute legend, real hero from yesterday. We're going to take a short break. After the break, we're going to be talking about Iran and Israel, drones over Israeli airspace at the moment. We'll also be talking more about Bondi. We'll be chatting to local Vaucluse MP Kelly Sloan. We'll speak to Richard Kemp about what's going on in Israel. All that on Outsiders. Don't go away. Back in a tick. Well, joining us now is Kelly Sloan, the MP for Vaucluse in the New South Wales Parliament. Kelly, not the greatest of days to be sitting here with you, but we've been covering this morning the tragedy of yesterday at Bondi Junction there. Obviously, you're right in the heart of it. How's it? When you woke up this morning, what were your kind of thoughts?
I was up most of the night. I was so concerned about that baby. You know, yesterday I got the call. The way I found out about it, my son called me. He was at the shopping centre. He wanted to let me know that he was okay. He'd left, he hadn't seen anything, but his friends had. And, you know, the footage that they had seen, what our kids in our community are seeing is horrific. So it's been a process of yesterday, you know, shock and information gathering. And today people are waking up and there's a sense of grief setting in. It's gone from shock and disbelief to, I guess, a grieving process now.
Liz?
What is there any, obviously being such a local MP, you wouldn't, nobody in the area would know nobody who was there.
Exactly.
Everyone is so interconnected. So either they know someone who was there or they may even be related to one of the victims. Is there, as a state MP, is there any particular advice you'd give people who need support right now with regard to specifically state mechanisms that they can pull on in such a time of need?
Well, first of all, our community is very strong and they are there for each other. So I'm on a lot of chat groups, whether it's my own school kids chat groups or broader ones. People are checking in on everyone, seeing that they're okay.
Right.
Beyond that, as a community leader, I'm talking with government, looking at support mechanisms for people in our community, increased counselling services, and we will wrap around the community. We will be there for them. They will need it. So, you know, today people are still in shock. It's turning to grief. But in the coming days, as they process this, they are going to need support. This is an incredibly traumatic event. People are horrified. It's been harrowing. And as you say, quite rightly, so many people were there. They witnessed it. They saw it. Their kids were there. And those, you know, it gives me chills still watching those pictures of children running from a man with a knife. And to me, as a mother, let alone a state MP, I'm in shock and disbelief that this could happen in our neighbourhood, in our city.
And we saw that man escorting his children out of the shopping centre with blindfolds on their eyes. They couldn't see the horror.
You know, and you want to shield your kids from this, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're not there, that man, I mean, what a parent, you know, and what do you do when you're in that situation? No one can prepare you for that. But in this day and age, you know, we can't shield our children's eyes because they see it. The images that have been circulating online, and this is, I guess, a very important message to parents, is to check in on your kids. Tell them don't look at these pictures if possible. Don't share them. It doesn't help the victims and it's not going to help your kids.
We're learning more about the victims. John Singleton's daughter, Dawn Singleton, is one of those who was killed yesterday, only 25 years old, was going to marry a New South Wales police officer. Just another tragedy. Each case is such a tragedy here. How does your community recover from this? How do they have confidence that we can be in crowded places and we're safe? Because there's going to be that trauma for many of them.
Well, first of all, can I just say to John and to his family, I am so sorry for your loss of such a precious young woman and a life ahead of her. I'm sorry for Ash and to her family, to the other families. You know, we will remember your children, your brothers, your sisters. We will be there for your families. But to your point about the community and how we move on, we're going to have to at some point, because we have a way of life in Australia that is the envy of the world. This is unusual. We haven't seen an attack like this in a decade here since the Lindt siege. And there's nothing to suggest that it will happen again. This was, fortunately, even though it was it's just terrible, but this was at least a lone man. He wasn't acting on ideology. And I want our community to feel safe again. I want them to be able to go back to Bondi Junction. I want my kids to be there, and I'll be telling them to go there. And but you know, short term, we've got a lot to process.
Absolutely, Kelly Sloan. Thanks so much for coming in and chatting to us. Awful situation. Flowers we're already seeing flowers being laid, wreaths being laid there at Bondi Junction. I'm sure you'll be very busy over the next few days, but thank you so much for sparing the time to chat to us. Let's go now to Richard Kemp, who is in Israel. Colonel Richard Kemp, regular here on Outsiders. The latest news is that there is a drone attack from Iran. Richard, you've been warning about this sort of thing for months and months. Tell us, Richard, the latest from where you are in Israel.
Well, I'm in Jerusalem at the moment, and a short while ago, maybe half an hour or so ago, there were a large number of drone intercepts by IDF air defence systems overhead in Jerusalem. Some of them very, very loud noises. I don't know whether that indicates that they were ballistic missiles in some cases rather than drones. It's very hard to know. But nevertheless, there were a large number of intercepts. I believe that there have been a few direct impacts, at least one direct impact of a drone or a ballistic missile inside Israel, but so far the information hasn't managed to filter out, as far as I'm concerned anyway. I do understand as well that the Royal Air Force and the US Air Force has been up in the sky alongside the Israeli Air Force to defend Israel against this Iranian attack, which is an extraordinary development, and I think one that's extremely welcome.
So you mentioned the RAF is there, Richard. What are Iran up to? You are a military strategist. Do they think are they testing Iran? Are they Israel? Are they testing Biden? Are they taking advantage of all the pressure on Israel to get out of Gaza? What's the game plan here?
Well, I think that to an extent this is a kind of face-saving maneuver on the part of Iran, because, of course, this is a direct retaliation for the 1st of April attack by Israel against Iranian military commanders in Syria who were planning attacks against Israel. And they said it was on Iranian sovereign territory because it was close to their embassy. And I guess they felt they had to do something to retaliate. And I'm assuming that retaliation would not have been intended to cause a major escalation in the Middle East. And I think, they would probably calculate that Israel's going to be, as it has been up until now in Gaza, is going to be under pressure from the US to minimize its retaliation against this attack because of the overriding need by the White House to de-escalate every situation rather than let it play out in the way that it needs to play out. For example, in this case, for Israel to carry out a very significant retaliation attack against Iran, which I think is what Israel should do, and I would expect Israel will do as a result of this.
What's going to be the reaction from the other Middle Eastern countries to this escalation? We're hearing reports that Saudi Arabia, Jordan are shooting down drones, missiles. Is this going to unite those countries behind Israel?
Well, I think in a way they're already united behind Israel, and this may be the most graphic demonstration of that. But Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, etc., they all want Israel to deal with Iran, whether it's directly by responding to this attack or whether it is indirectly by destroying Hamas or other Iranian proxies. But they're on the side of Israel on this because they very much fear Iran. Of course, let's not forget, Iran has carried out both direct and proxy attacks against Saudi Arabia and the UAE in the past. It's a big concern for them. So I think, yeah, they're going to be pretty firmly. They may not come out in public and say so, but they're going to be pretty firmly on the side of Israel here.
Liz.
Colonel, when I heard word of these drones being sent to Israel, as well as possible missiles, etc., I probably thought, like a lot of viewers thought, which was, well, the Iron Dome will just blow them to shreds. But I now understand there's limited capacity to just how much protection the Iron Dome can provide, depending on how sophisticated, how complex such a missile drone strike would be. Can you elucidate on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, don't quote me on this,
Sure.
but my understanding is that this is the biggest drone attack in history. Okay, the history may not go back that long of attack drones, but it's a very significant attack. And I believe that there have also been ballistic missiles in the array. And also, my understanding is that there have been drones fired from Yemen as well. And also, there have certainly been rockets fired from Lebanon into the Golan Heights. So the idea, I think, is to overwhelm Israel's missile defence, and it may well be that's happened because we're certainly aware. I'm certainly aware of at least one direct impact. There may be more. I don't know yet, but I think Israel will have been had its defences boosted by US and British air defence support as well. So it may prove that the Iranians, if there is only one direct impact, if there's no real damage done, this could be also an embarrassment for Iran in its sort of much heralded severe retaliation, punishing the Zionist entity. Well, we don't know how it's going to unfold yet. But if they don't do some fairly severe damage to Israel, then they will show themselves, I think, to be pretty impotent, and that could have an effect on the extent to which they can continue motivating some of their proxies around the region.
Rita.
I want to play you just a clip from yesterday, President Biden being asked about the possible escalation in the Middle East and action from Iran. Let's have a listen.
What is your message to Iran in this moment?
Don't.
Don't. We've heard that before from the Biden administration. Iran hasn't listened to that. Just take me through the Biden administration's response to this conflict, what they're expected to do now, and whether the weakness and ineptness we've seen from the Biden administration has added to the conflict.
Well, in addition to the don't, which was ignored, there's been a lot of intensive diplomatic activity by the US in the region to try and prevent Iran from doing this. And despite all that, they still did it. The US intention is to de-escalate, is to contain Iran rather than strike back at Iran. And I think now that Iran has struck, the next phase of President Biden's strategy will be to try and restrain Israel, to try and prevent Israel from effectively striking back. I hope Israel doesn't take any notice of that. But I think that's been Biden's strategy all along. And we've seen it when his own forces have been attacked and American soldiers and support staff killed in those attacks directed from Iran with very little response. And that, of course, weakness encourages more and more attacks. Strength deters, weakness provokes.
Absolutely. And just quickly, 30 seconds, Richard, when do you expect to see the move into Rafah, hopefully wiping out Hamas in Gaza there?
Well, it's very hard to say that. And I think this could affect that situation, because if this does include a significant series of attacks from Lebanon, then the likelihood is that Israel will have to launch some form of concerted offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And if it does that, that might delay the operation in Rafah because, of course, Israel has a finite number of troops and they would prefer not, unless they have to be fighting hard on two fronts.
Absolutely. Colonel Richard Kemp, please stay safe there in Israel with and all our best wishes to you and to your friends who are over there. After the break, we'll chat to Dr. David Adler about the impact on the Jewish community yesterday in Bondi Junction with the knife man and the horrific events that took place at Westfield's shopping centre. You're watching Outsiders, and thank you for watching Outsiders. It's a dark day, as we've been saying, not only here in Sydney, the after events of the horror show at Bondi Junction yesterday, but also now there is an attack on Israel from Iran, drones and missiles. Joining us now is Dr. David Adler. Now, David, you live in Bondi, you know the area very well. You run the Australian Jewish Association, which has the largest social media network in Australia of the Jewish community. Now, the first thing is the police are telling us categorically there was no ideological or religious motivations behind the killing, although, as we've been discussing, they don't know what the motivation was. But what I wanted to ask you about, David, is the impact before the killer or during the slayings and in the immediate aftermath. You would have been inundated with social media photos. I was certainly, but it would have been much more on yours. The terror, regardless of what the motivation of the killer was, there was terror stalking the streets of Bondi Junction, and the Jewish community would have been rightly terrified.
Absolutely correct, Rowan. And of course, we are in a very heated environment anyway. And initially, to not make too light of it, it walked like a duck and quacked like a duck and looked like a duck. And a lot of people thought, yes, this was terrorism. Throughout the world, not just in Israel, but in France, in the UK, even in America and some European countries, there was many examples of these so-called lone wolf terrorists that use a large knife to carry out their crimes. And that was the original assumption, and I understand that assumption, obviously, and we're very relieved, if you can use that word in such a tragic context, that it does not appear to have been terrorist motivated.
And what was it like for the Jewish community? I mean, it must have been absolutely horrific.
Well, it was a shock, and it's a shock anyway because Westfield complexes are associated with a famous Jewish family, the Lowys, of course, and they're known as supporters of Israel. Bondi Junction is the commercial centre of the eastern suburbs. The eastern suburbs has the largest Jewish community in Sydney. And we know, I don't have permission to identify the names, but amongst the victims were Jewish people, as you would expect, attacking in a crowd indiscriminately in that location. There will be Jewish people amongst it. So it has impacted the community, regardless of whether it was terrorist motivated or not.
I understand, David, a gentleman known to you in the Jewish community has introduced himself basically and let you know that there's being a story painted by commentators online. In fact, Channel 7 even ran with it, that this horrendous crime was actually perpetrated by a Jewish person, which of course is completely, patently untrue. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely, and this is just shows how an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory can get hold.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of large social media accounts with the names of Syrian Girl and Russian Cossack, rather infamous in their attitudes.
They are.
And it was picked up, as you say, by mainstream media, Channel 7. And the name that was given falsely, it was entirely fake news, to the perpetrator was Benjamin Cohen. And there is a real Benjamin Cohen. His name is indeed trending on Twitter. And he's been in touch with us and said, my name's Ben Cohen. I am currently trending on several social media platforms following a false accusation that I am the attacker. And then he says, I've heard that you're coming onto Sky News, and I'd love for you to bring up this false accusation, how it is used to propel anti-Semitism and destroy my name in the process.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so fake news there about Benjamin Cohen. Want to talk to you about Iran and the attacks on Israel this morning. Donald Trump has come out and said, we'll just have a listen, that is all, and I agree with him totally, and you will too, David, because you wrote about it in The Spectator Australia, that it's all Joe Biden's fault. Have a listen to Donald Trump.
The people of Israel, they're under attack right now. That's because we show great weakness. It would not happen. The weakness that we've shown, it's unbelievable, and it would not have happened if we were in office. You know that. They know that. Everybody knows that. But America prays for Israel, and we send our absolute support to everyone in harm's way. This is an attack that would not have happened.
So, David, you're too modest to say I told you so, but you did tell us so. You did warn about this right back when Biden was elected, that this would lead to war in the Middle East.
Well, it's turned out worse than we forecast. And it's not just Biden. This is in part the John Kerry, Barack Obama legacy. They released billions of dollars. It was continued by Biden. And in Australia, what can we do? We recently had our government backflip on the prescribing of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organisation, and that has to be revisited.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. David Adler, thoughts with everybody you know in the Bondi area and throughout Sydney, and thanks for coming on this morning on Outsiders.
Thank you.
Afterwards, we'll go back to Bondi Junction to talk again to Kenny. Stay here on Outsiders, lots coming up, and we'll be discussing Iran as well here on Outsiders. Back in a tick. You're watching Outsiders, and joining us now live from Bondi Junction is Sky News reporter Kenny Heatley. Kenny.
Ron, good morning. As you can see here, the outpouring of grief has begun. We've had politicians come lay flowers, members of the public, and now this sweet little girl laying flowers because of what's happened here. So this outpouring of grief is expected to grow throughout the morning. We also have seen something quite grim happen in the last hour or so. We saw bodies in body bags get taken out of Westfield into transport vehicles, and then those transport vehicles about 15 minutes ago left the scene. So that's an update on the crime scene about what's happening in Westfield right now. And joining me here is Health Minister Ryan Park. Minister, we just saw, in the last hour, the body's been removed from a Westfield shopping centre. It's shocking.
Well, it's absolutely shocking. The events of yesterday are unbelievably horrific, and the likes that we really haven't seen before. I think the country woke up this morning with probably more questions than answers, but what we do know is that there are people alive today because of the brave men and women of the New South Wales Police Force and our paramedics and our healthcare workers who literally in some cases work miracles to keep people alive overnight.
As a Health Minister, what have you been doing? I understand we saw the pictures yesterday of the huge paramedic response that was out here. Can you talk us through the paramedic response and how big it was? And also, we have a 9-month-old baby in Sydney's Children's Hospital. Have you spoken to any nurses or practitioners who were there? How are they doing?
Well, yesterday we saw around 75 paramedics on scene in what was a major event, and we saw additional 40 ambulances and paramedic specialist vehicles. Last night I attended a debriefing of about 30 to 40 paramedics at Randwick Ambulance Station, spoke to those frontline paramedics who were first on scene, and the scenes were absolutely chaotic. You could imagine them treating random people on the ground in the floor of a Westfield, not knowing if the attacker was still nearby. They're doing this on their own in some cases until further backup arrive. Last night I also went across to the Children's Hospital at Randwick, and I spoke with the nurses and clinicians who worked on that baby who was presented there in a critical condition. They've performed miracles overnight. That baby is in ICU, still in a critical condition. But I just want to acknowledge the enormous health response as well as the police effort. And truly, people are alive this morning because of it.
Minister, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much. So just to recap, guys, what we've seen in the last hour with bodies being removed from inside Westfield, there is still a cordoned off crime scene, and that will remain for at least the rest of the day. Those bodies being removed in red bags and then placed into vans, and then about 15-20 minutes ago those vans have exited. We understand also that there are 1,500 cars underneath here parked from people who were here yesterday. They were told yesterday they had to leave them there because it was an active crime scene. We understand that Westfield is working with the state government and the local government to work with those people in retrieving those cars at some point today. But this could be an active crime scene for a couple of days, and how long Westfield remains closed, well, that's yet to be confirmed. But right now, an outpouring of grief here at Westfield Bondi Junction, and I suspect that by the end of the day that is going to be a huge pile of flowers, and to see little kids coming and laying flowers, it's truly heartbreaking, guys.
Kenny Heatley, thanks so much. The shot there of the little girl placing the flowers, that will stay with us. And as you say, I expect that will grow and grow during the course of the day. And Kenny Heatley will be there during the rest of the day. Rita?
And we're learning more about the knifeman and some of the victims. Two of the victims are being reported as being from overseas, no family in Australia. And we're learning more about the assailant from his Facebook posts. Nothing that signals this sort of insanity and violence. He was posting about surfing at Bondi. He was posting about wanting to learn Swedish, wanting someone who was fluent in Swedish to teach him. So, yeah, it just deepens the confusion around this. I mean, how you can be posting about surfing at Bondi one week and then inflicting this carnage the week after.
Absolutely. It's too horrific for words. You're watching Outsiders. It is a very sad and disturbing morning here in Sydney. A beautiful autumn afternoon in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and 6 people were murdered yesterday afternoon in Bondi Junction. The last few hours we have learnt the name, as Rita was saying, of the attacker who was shot dead by the police. It was a 40-year-old Joel Couchy, who was known to police in Queensland but had relocated to Sydney. 5 women and 1 man were killed by this man yesterday, including the mother of a baby who is being treated in hospital. The baby is. We've just learnt the bodies are being removed from the complex, as Kenny was just telling us right now. Bondi Beach is one of the most iconic Australian locations, known and loved around the world. To the north, it's the beautiful, dazzling harbourside homes of Double Bay, Rose Bay, Watsons Bay and the harbour. To the east, you've got the world-famous surfing beaches of Bondi, Bronte, Tamarama. To the west, the bustling cafe city street life of Paddington and Oxford Street. No visitor to Sydney would not be very familiar with certainly some, if not all, of those iconic places, and smack bang in the middle of them, the shopping hub of Bondi Junction. Bondi is also the home, as we were saying, to Sydney's most vibrant, exciting and important Jewish communities. The police at this moment have not yet given us the motive for the murderous knife rampage by this lone knife-wielding John Couchy character, but they do say it is not terrorism-related. The bravery of the police woman, amazing woman, Amy Scott, seen here in this photo, will forever sum up this tragic event. An Aussie Sheila, I'd say, a great Aussie Sheila. She probably goes surfing at Bondi Beach, and she takes down a vile, cowardly, despicable, murderous scumbag. And the tragedy and the bravery of one of the victims, Dr. Ashley Good, who threw her baby into the arms of 2 brothers, is something that will haunt us all forever. Our thoughts and prayers are with that baby and Ashley's friends and families, as they are with all the loved ones of all 6 victims and those who are injured still in hospital. But we all need to know what led to this dreadful, premeditated, murderous rampage, targeting women and even a baby. The first press interview by Police Commissioner Karen Webb was, let's face it, unsatisfactory, where she claimed the attack was not terror-related by, well, try telling the people who fled in terror that it was not terror-related. It certainly was to that extent. Remember, this knife attack by a lone man occurred in the heart of Sydney's Jewish community, only a couple of blocks from the Central Synagogue. Whether deliberately or not, terror, yes, terror, stalked Bondi Junction yesterday. The police chief says the murderous thug was known to police, Queensland Police. If he was known well enough for them to work out his motivation, then why in God's name was he out on the streets in the first place? And if he was not well known enough for them to know his motivation, as they're saying, well, how can they be so confident it wasn't related to some warped ideology or thinking or whatever? This tragedy will cast a long and ugly shadow over all our lives, but particularly the people of the eastern suburbs of Sydney. All our thoughts and prayers are with you today. In the meantime, Israel is under attack from Iran. This is the direct result of weak Western leadership, the type of weak leadership personified by Joe Biden, by Kamala Harris, and in my opinion, here in Australia, by Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong, who have disgraced themselves in the last few weeks with their attitudes and comments on Israel and Gaza. In my opinion, you are either unequivocally on the side of Israel and will defend her to the hilt, or you are not. Roll on next year when hopefully we have Peter Dutton in the lodge and Donald Trump back in the Oval Office. I'm not sure how much more of this mob we can actually take. Joining us now is Dave Sharma, a Liberal Senator, former Wentworth MP, covering Bondi and the surrounding area. David, thanks for coming on. I know you were rushed back to be with us and to be here in Sydney. You know this electorate very well. You know the area very well. Awful events yesterday. What are your thoughts on it, David?
Look, it's just devastating, Rowan. I think people are all in a deep sense of shock. I've had a lot of people checking in, and I've been checking in on a lot of people. My daughters, who, you know, frequent visitors to the mall, as is my wife and I. You know, it's the central shopping district if you live in the eastern suburbs, where people do their groceries, where children go to the movies, where, you know, kids don't go and do dance classes. There's a lot of people there on any given day, and to see something like this and the terror that was inflicted on the people who are in the mall and experiencing this attack and hiding for their lives or running for their lives it's just indescribable. I mean, I'm glad it's over, but I feel terrible for the 6 victims, the many people who are hospitalised, and of course all their families and loved ones.
Rita.
Despite that horror, you must feel proud of your community there, because from all the footage we've seen, there was just incredible courage shown by so many, not just the police officer who took down the knifeman, but just ordinary people arming themselves with plastic chairs and bollards and running towards danger.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are, you know, a lot of people civilians who are unarmed and obviously untrained, doing their best to deal with this offender, to deflect him away, to repel his, you know, assaults. And of course, the lone police officer, I mean, what a tremendous act of bravery. And thank God she had the presence of mind to do what she did and stop the loss of more innocent life. I mean, I think we've heard many acts of bravery and we've seen some footage of it already, and I'm sure we'll have or see and hear many similar stories in the days to come. It was nice to see. I know it's small comfort to many people, but it was just heartening to see humans looking out for one another in a terrible situation.
Liz.
Dave, having been ambassador to Israel for some years prior, were you hearing from quite a few people in the Jewish community, in your former electorate, who obviously, until the police made known rather late last night that they believed that this was no link to terrorism, they were probably more concerned than most in the area, fearing for the worst?
Look, I think it's certainly true to say that people in the area, and especially the Jewish community, have been in a sort of heightened state of stress, because we have been, you know, people have been worried about strong tempers and strong emotions flaring out into something else, ideologically committed crimes or terrorism. It seems, as the police have said, that this did not have an ideological motivation or a political motivation in that sense. But look, certainly people in the area, because of what's been going on in the Israel-Gaza conflict and because of some of the protests we've seen, people in the area have been, I think, a little more alert than they have otherwise or would otherwise have been. And that said, people might have been avoiding the CBD, but Bondi Junction, Westfield Bondi Junction has, I don't think anyone would have necessarily thought that we would see crimes committed like the ones we saw yesterday.
And just very quickly, David, you did live, as Liz said, you were the ambassador to Israel. In fact, I had a wonderful dinner with you one evening. Thank you very much. There in Israel. Your thoughts on this attack from Iran? Drones, ballistic missiles. We've heard from Richard Kemp earlier. Is Iran kind of probing Israel's weaknesses for a later attack? Is that what's going on? Is this trying to avert something happening in Gaza? Your thoughts, David?
Look, I think the attack has been widely telegraphed, obviously. I think for Iran, to be honest with you, it's about preserving some of their, national dignity or reputation, because the blow that Israel dealt them in Damascus on the 1st of April, killing 7 of their senior generals, has been quite a humiliation for the regime. My sense is that, look, they have to be seen to respond, but provided, I think Israel's obviously on high alert. I don't know whether Iran's response will actually be able to, penetrate Israeli air defences and do any damage or not. But my sense is that neither side wants this to escalate further, but there's a recognition, if you like, that Iran was always going to do something in response to this.
Dave Sharma, thanks so much for talking to us, and I trust all your family are well and safe there in Bondi Junction, in that area. Thank you so much, Dave Sharma. Joining us now to discuss the attack on Israel from Iran is the attack with the drone attack from Iran on Israel. Here is Andrew Wallace, the Coalition Liberal National Party MP, who is also in the federal government, who is also the Deputy Chair of the Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders this morning. Israel under attack from Iran, drones, ballistic missiles. The RAF are there and the Americans are there. No Australians helping out, but there you go. Tell us your thoughts on it.
Well, I think what we're seeing now is a direct result as of the attacks of October 7. We know we're intricately involved in supporting Hezbollah in the attacks to the north of Israel. The response that we saw in Damascus from Israel was an expected one. And Dave Sharp is absolutely right. What this response just overnight in Israel is Iran effectively trying to save face. Let's hope and pray that it's a very significant attack that's being mounted on Israel with missiles and as I understand, hundreds of drones. I also understand on a chat group from Israel that Iran has launched an attack on a US airbase, on a US base in Iraq as well. So Iran certainly being absolutely provocative in this, and let's just hope that we're able to contain this.
Well, let's have a listen to an IDF spokesperson talking, Andrew, about what has been happening on the ground in Israel.
Over 200 killer drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles towards the state of Israel. Together with our allies and partners across the region, we are operating at this very moment to defend Israel from Iran's attack. So far, we have intercepted the vast majority of incoming missiles by Israeli systems. So far, we have intercepted and are continuing to intercept dozens of attack drones as well as cruise missiles and ballistic missiles outside of Israel's border.
Rita?
Foreign Minister Penny Wong, the entire Albanese government have been quite clear on their position on Israel and what they see as necessary for long-term peace there. Will this change anything from the Australian government? Will this hopefully wake them up to the realities on the ground there and this fantasy of a two-state solution that they seem to be wedded to?
Well, Rita, I hope so, but I fear it won't. Clearly, Penny Wong has nailed her colours to the mast during the week about their view in relation to jumping the gun on a two-state solution. On the 7th of October, only 6 months after the horrendous event in southern Israel. And for Penny Wong to have come out and changed a bipartisan position on Israel for decades, it just beggars belief. It's a total abrogation of Australia's responsibility to the only real democratic ally in the Middle East.
Andrew, I couldn't agree more with you. We're having trouble with the sound there, so we'll leave it there. But thank you so much for coming on Outsiders this morning. But you're 100% correct. The Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese flirtation with the recognition of Palestine, etc., etc. I'll be talking about that in Clown Show shortly, where it belongs. After the break, Natasha Hausdorff. You're watching Outsiders, and joining us now is Natasha Hausdorff, who's a barrister and legal director of the UK Lawyers for Israel charitable trust, which provides legal support to victims of anti-Semitism. Natasha, great to have you here on Outsiders. Been very keen to get you on. Let's first go to Iran and the attacks this morning on Israel before we get into the questions of that I'd like to put to you about Anwar and about Australia kind of flirting with recognising Palestine, this sort of thing. But just quickly, your thoughts on what is happening in Israel right now.
It's very good to be with you. Firstly, may I extend my condolences to everyone who's been affected by the stabbing attack in Sydney and Bondi. I know we've been watching from the UK with great concern at those developments, and certainly those who have been injured and killed and their families. What we've been seeing, of course, in the last few hours developing, I think, tells us two things. First, this is certainly Iran escalating this issue into a regional conflict. But the second real significant takeaway is that the Israeli defensive technology that has been on display, certainly with respect to the first wave of drones and ballistic missiles that we have seen, has proved itself to be extraordinary. We're very familiar with the Iron Dome defensive missile system that deals with shorter range rockets, but what we have seen on display this evening, by all accounts, has been the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 programs as well. It seems as David Sling. And in terms of at least this first wave of an extraordinary development, Iran launching an attack on Israeli sovereign territory itself, not using, of course, its proxies that it has over the last 6 months been utilising to attack Israel. Of course, Hezbollah from Lebanon, Hamas from Gaza, and also more widely, we've been seeing the influence of the Houthis in Yemen. This significant escalation so far seems only to have caused one casualty, a tragedy, a severely injured 10-year-old girl from the Bedouin community in the south. But so far, it does seem that Israel is successfully repelling this attack with extraordinary technology that we've seen on display.
Now, Natasha, you're a lawyer and you've looked in great depth into all the various attacks on Israel, such as the South African, the ICJ thing and all of that. But what I want to ask you about is Australia. And the Australian government has refinanced Anwar. It has taken a number of measures. It's called for or flirted with the idea of recognition of Palestine without any kind of, just go ahead and recognise Palestine. We've also seen Australia sending an envoy to investigate the tragic WCK aid workers' deaths. Now, you don't normally send envoys to investigate your allies. So give us your thoughts on what is Australia doing? What's your take on the Australian government? And what are they up to?
Well, unfortunately, these steps are not Australia's alone. And I think it can very significantly be linked to the extreme escalation that we've seen this evening over here from London, in the early hours of the morning at your end. The rhetoric that we have also seen coming out of the United States seems that liberal democracies are turning their back on Israel, despite the fact that Israel is very much fighting our war, that in defense of liberal democracies and the values that we hold dear, both in Australia, in the UK, in the US, and the increasing rhetoric that we have seen in support, one may say, of the terrorist proxies that Iran has been deploying is deeply concerning. And I think I certainly hear the arguments that many have been raising that this is what has triggered the Iranians to consider such an explosive escalation to be something that they would undertake. Certainly the investigation into the World Central Kitchen tragedy is something Israel launched very quickly. It conducted an independent investigation in that the retired officers that were in charge of it were outside of the chain of command. And in that respect, in fact, Israel did something that I don't think we've seen other militaries conduct. When I think about recent strikes perhaps conducted by the US, most notably that in 2021 in Kabul, a drone strike which killed an aid worker and his family. The response by the Americans was very, very different to the immediate apology that we had from Israel, the acknowledgement of responsibility and a decided effort to learn from mistakes. And that is, of course, testament to the fact that Israel does not target civilians. And so many military and legal experts, some of them with experience on the ground, have repeatedly said that Israel goes far above the requirements of international law and, in fact, the practices of most other law-abiding armies around the world in ensuring that civilians and aid workers and other non-military targets are kept safe to the utmost of its ability. And the measures that are adopted. Yes.
Your group provides legal support to victims of anti-Semitism. It's one thing to deal with individuals who may be anti-Semitic, but how do you deal with institutional anti-Semitism? Because we actually are seeing that not just at universities, but you could argue from segments of the media, the BBC, and even segments of the Democrats with the Squad and a virulently anti-Israel sentiment there. So how do you deal with that rise?
Yes, and unfortunately also the international organisations, including UNRWA and other UN bodies, as have already been mentioned. The difficulty here, I think, is in identifying and being clear when we identify the modern manifestation of anti-Semitism as it targets the Jewish state. And we see this manifested in modern blood libels and falsehoods that are propagated against Israel, I'm sorry to say, even in otherwise respected and respectable international institutions and across increasingly international legal institutions. And one of the roles that UK Lawyers for Israel Charitable Trust embraces, in addition to providing support for victims of anti-Semitism, is to try and educate on these issues, especially as far as international law is concerned. Because so often, especially in the international legal arena, we're seeing an abuse of law, an inversion of the real international law and a misapplication of it. And that is a threat, I would say, not just to Israel, as we have been seeing develop over the last 6 months, including in the attacks by South Africa at the International Court of Justice. It seems very much on behalf of the internationally prescribed terrorist organization Hamas, but also the impact of the devaluing of international law and of international legal institutions like the International Court of Justice, that has a significant impact, I would say, for international law more broadly, and for all states, Australia, the UK included, that value the rule of law and that set store by being law-abiding themselves. And in that respect, this modern manifestation of anti-Semitism is something that really needs to be tackled head-on.
Thank you so much, Natasha. We're going to have to leave it there. We could chat about so much more, and we will do in the future. Thanks so much. We're going to take a short break. I'll just read this announcement from the Good family. So, of course, that is Ash Good. Here's the announcement from her family today. Quote, "We appreciate the well wishes and thoughts of members of the Australian public who have expressed an outpouring of love for Ashley and our baby girl. We can report that after hours of surgery yesterday, our baby is currently doing well. We are so grateful for the expert care and attention of the medical team at Sydney Children's Hospital. To the two men who held and cared for our baby when Ashley could not, words cannot express our gratitude. We are struggling to come to terms with what has occurred. We would appreciate peace and privacy while we work through this as a family." That is the statement from Ashley Good's family. She died and bravely handed her baby over to those two men we showed earlier. After the break, Canberra Clown Show. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Canberra Clown Show, and returning for a special encore this week was none other than Penny Wong, who was so reckless that only days before Iran decided to launch a drone attack against Israel, Penny Wong decided she'd jump into the Middle Eastern fray by betraying Israel, our ally, by suggesting Australia might recognise Palestine in order to force the two-state solution. What a clown. Great timing, Penny. Maybe the Ayatollahs took it as a positive sign. Now, since 1948, plenty of talented clowns have tried desperately and failed to pull off this amazing juggling two-state solution act, in which the successful democracy known as Israel, the home of the Jews, attempts to help establish an equally successful democracy known as Palestine right next door. Warning, folks, do not try this at home. President Barack Obama had a crack at it, and he certainly kept the cartoonists happy, but that was about it. Before him, George Bush used a famous speech in the Rose Garden to attempt this mighty challenge.
My vision is two states, living side by side, in peace and security. There is simply no way to achieve that peace until all parties fight terror.
But both of those two were rank amateurs compared to the greatest two-state solution artist of them all, the Camp David Trio, featuring American cigar-touting clown Bill Clinton with his buddies Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak, who in the year 2000 came this close to pulling off a two-state solution trick. Or did they? No, not really. It was all an illusion. As Bill Clinton later confided, the effort nearly killed him, because although the Americans and the Israelis offered the Palestinians pretty much everything that they wanted, still they said no.
I killed myself to give the Palestinians a state. I had a deal they turned down that would have given them all of Gaza, all of Gaza, between 96 and 97% of the West Bank, compensating land in Israel, you name it.
Yet, despite decades of failures and statistics showing support for a two-state solution has now plummeted, our very own Penny Wong the Clown decided now is the time for her to single-handedly try and revive it by proclaiming the Australian government is considering official recognition of a Palestinian state.
Ultimately, peace, security for Israel will only be achieved if we have a Palestinian state alongside the Israeli state.
Well, Penny seems to forget that since 2005, there has been, in effect, a trial run for a two-state solution. The people of Gaza, under Palestinian Authority, living side by side with Israel. So Israel in 2004, under a Likud-Labour coalition government, and despite the public not wanting them to do so, decided to test out the idea of land for peace and gave control of Gaza to the Palestinian residents there, which included dismantling and removing around 8,000 Jews from their homes in 21 Israeli settlements, with many desperately resisting in vain. So what happened next? The people of Gaza elected Hamas rather than the Palestinian Authority to represent them, and thus began 2 decades of terrorism and bloodshed, culminating in the horror of October 7th. After which, understandably, most Israelis no longer have any appetite for a two-state solution of any kind, with the New York Times last week calling it an unjust and impossible fantasy. And opinion polls showing a rapid decrease in belief that the two states can peacefully coexist from both Jewish and Arab Israelis. Yet, it is precisely at this critical time when, in my opinion, the world should be solely focused on ensuring Hamas is annihilated, Israel can defend itself, Hamas is annihilated, and every hostage is freed. That's the moment Penny Wong decides to bang the tired old two-state solution drum by suggesting under Labor, Australia might recognise a Palestinian state where none currently exists. This is essentially rewarding Hamas for October 7th and encouraging further terrorism to meet those goals. It is also encouraging places like Iran to think Israel has lost Western support. It is insanity. And why did Penny Wong suddenly make this absurd call? Here's Senator James Patterson pulling back the curtain.
I thought it was grossly irresponsible and cynical behaviour by the Foreign Minister, putting at risk our relationship with Israel, a very important intelligence and security partner for Australia and a like-minded democracy in a very tough region, and one which is clearly playing to domestic politics over our international security interests in a way in which you would hope a foreign minister would never do. But this has been all laid out for us very openly, Pete. In The Australian yesterday, we had a state New South Wales Labor MP openly saying that the Labor Party had to change its position on Israel-Palestine, otherwise it would lose seats in southwestern Sydney to pro-Palestine independent candidates, and that that Labor needed to shift it away from its support for Israel if it wanted to hold those seats. I mean, that is what this is about.
Well said, Senator Patterson. And don't forget, Peter Dutton called it the most reckless thing from a foreign minister he'd seen in 22 years in Parliament, and I agree with him. And of course, clown show ringmaster Al Bozo happily played along, obfuscating about whether or not Labor intends to unilaterally recognise a Palestinian state.
Would your government consider recognising Palestine as a state before agreed boundaries are agreed to by the protagonists, Israel and the Palestinians?
Well, we support a two-state solution.
Right, didn't answer the question. Penny Wong would appear to have form for making up Middle East policy on the trot, pun intended. She has insisted on sending a special envoy to investigate the tragic aid worker death, something unthinkable for an ally to do in such a situation. She unilaterally decided to reinstate UNRWA funding with Australian tax dollars. She changed the designation of the disputed territories to the occupied territories, and she decided to make a policy change on Jerusalem on one of the Jewish holy days without even informing the Israeli ambassador to Australia, which led to this awkward exchange between a clearly uncomfortable bureaucrat from DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs, trying not to land his boss, Penny Wong, in it.
We're talking about whether there had been a change in policy or not, and at that point in time there had not been a change in policy. So that's what we were talking about, Senator.
So you advised him there had not been a change in policy. Did you advise him that it was possible there would be a change in policy, that it was under consideration?
I advised him what the situation was at the time, Senator, which was that at that point in time there was no change in policy.
Surely you were aware it was under consideration.
Well, I think you're putting the officer in a difficult position.
Yes, a very difficult position, having to justify Penny Wong's ridiculous, there was no change of policy, then until there is a change of policy. Meanwhile, Australia's reputation around the world has taken a dive. Here, shamefully, is a UK Telegraph map of the friends and enemies of Israel, published 2 days ago. Is it a coincidence that Australia is no longer viewed as one of Israel's allies? I don't think so. Here's a story this week in the Israeli media slamming Australia's, quote, maverick foreign policy and Foreign Minister Penny Wong's double standards and failure to understand international law. And I quote, Australia's extraordinary self-authorising decision to appoint a special advisor to interfere in a foreign country's domestic investigation is unprecedented in military review and discipline. The diplomatic insult implying Israel is incapable of conducting a professional investigation without outside supervision might well blow back against Australia. Binskin was commander of air operations in Operation Iraqi Freedom, where hundreds of innocents died. He's the bloke that they're going to appoint. Several other countries' civilian nationals have been accidentally harmed by past Australian Defence Force operations, including those of Afghanistan and Indonesia. Can they now demand their own special advisors access to and oversight of ADF investigation and disciplinary processes? And would Australia let them? That was an Israeli editorial. Peter Dutton has called Penny Wong's advocacy for a Palestinian state, as I said, the most reckless act of a foreign minister in decades. For a crass domestic political win, Penny Wong has irreparably damaged our relationships with our ally, Israel, he said. Yes, that's Albo, Penny Wong and the Labour Party, treating allies with contempt and thinking they know best. Heaven help us, or as World Party put it, save us from this ship of fools. You're watching Outsiders Dark Day. We'll be talking a bit more about Bondi in a second and a bit more, of course, about Iran's attack on Israel. But let's just lighten the mood for a moment or two with a little bit of lefty lunacy. So Donald Trump, have a listen to this, Liz and Rita. This is hilarious. Donald Trump obviously being investigated for all these supposed alleged crimes. What do the people of New York think? Here's a passerby. Have a listen.
Is this unprecedented to arrest a former president for not turning in documents?
A former president that had committed this many provable criminal acts.
But what are the provable criminal acts, I guess?
Provable criminal acts. Well, I'm done talking.
Liz, what do you reckon? I'm done talking.
I'm done talking. I get this all the time when you encounter Trump haters, just in everyday life, usually because I'm asking for it because I'm wearing a Trump 2020 cap. I've still got all my old merch.
Good.
And so they'll lambast you with how much they hate Trump, and you ask them for one comprehensive reason why. You'll say his foreign policy was unprecedented. We had no wars. The states hadn't had it that good economically since the 60s until COVID hit, of course. And you reel off all his accomplishments, and they've got nothing to fire back. So
and
it's
also,
great
well,
to see
if they
him caught
do
on
fire
camera.
something, it's normally false.
Yeah.
Well, it was all that Russian stuff. Sorry, what? Or it was this, or it was that, Rita.
Well, yeah. This Trump derangement syndrome, it's
Alive and well.
provides plenty of content for me, I can tell you that. So long may it rain.
Well, iPhone also have a bit of Israel derangement syndrome. Apparently your iPhone, Liz, tell us about this.
This is appalling. So as we know, predictive text, if you type something into an iPhone, it sometimes pops up with a little image depicting what you've written. So if you write happy, it'll come up with a smiley. Well, someone's decided to program this thing. So if you type Jerusalem, it comes up with the Palestinian flag. Apple have, of course, said, oh, there's a problem here, some sort of bug, we'll fix it. No. Technology only does these things because it was told to. It's not independent thinking. Find the culprit and let us make justice known. Because whenever they try to pass this off as some sort of glitch in the system, do me a
some
favour.
Character somewhere.
This is Jew hatred manifesting itself wherever it can.
Vegan meat revelations. This is going to surprise you, Rita. Apparently, I think it's called the Impossible Burger, but it's a plant-based burger.
Wow, I'm so shocked that, a product that is manufactured using dozens of weird ingredients you've never, ever heard of with names you can't even pronounce is not actually good for you. I'm shocked. I'm shocked because, those vegans look just so healthy and also mentally agile. Look, I've got no problem with people who want to be vegans, but trying to have these meat substitutes that then they're trying to feed to us and give us bugs and all this craziness, it's not going to catch on.
Well, this particular one, apparently, the study says that it gives the study says that it heightens the risk of diabetes and heart problems. This is one of these plant-based things. Liz, you go into those supermarkets, the one shelves, the area is guaranteed to be packed. The plant-based fake meat ones, they're the ones.
But Woolies still say we can't sell Australia Day merchandise because there's not demand. But they stock this stuff despite the fact that it just sits on the shelf forever. But you know what? It can sit on the shelf forever because there's got no expiry date, a lot of it.
It's all soy protein, dry powder. Also sunflower oil, which is terrible for you because it's seed oils. We're all supposed to be avoiding those.
Now, Rita, update on Bondi.
We're learning more about the knifeman here. There's a police car parked outside his childhood home in Toowoomba. He grew up in Toowoomba, went to Harristown State School, graduated in 2000, went on to the University of South Queensland. Also learning that he worked for several years as an English tutor. So none of this information provides any sort of explanation of what happened yesterday. But there have also been reports that he suffered from schizophrenia. That's something that's been reported in the mainstream media now. So perhaps that gives us an indication of if there was an episode or what precisely happened. But this is going to be something that is going to haunt so many people who lost loved ones yesterday, who witnessed that carnage. Why did this happen? Was there a way for this to have been avoided?
Liz.
It would have been really helpful if the police had said that this morning rather than mental health issues, which of course is the broadest brush. What was he struggling from? Depression and anxiety? Something like schizophrenia obviously is a threat, and this wouldn't be the first time someone who suffered from such a condition was seized by such a horrific episode. I mean, what do you call this happening? But watching him on screen, he did it all quite calmly. There was no kind of frenetic behaviour, which I found confusing. It would be really helpful to hear from his family and friends. to see if he's had any violent behaviours like this before. Because like you say, Rita, everything that you're reading out there regarding his life just points to absolutely nothing. The only real lead that we, the public, have at the moment is this,
and even those reports
schizophrenia.
are now not confirmed because we haven't heard them from the police, but the Daily Telegraph's published that a neighbour who knows him from years ago has said he had schizophrenia and, you know, he seemed disturbed. That was the description they gave.
Right.
I guess there's lots more to be learnt there. Just very quickly, wouldn't be outsiders if we didn't mention Chris Bowen. He's out there accusing Senator Gerard Rennick of being a climate denier simply because Gerard Rennick pointed out that some islands are getting bigger, not smaller. Strange old world. We'll have lots more of that next week. In the meantime, keep safe, particularly all our thoughts, loves and prayers to everyone around the Bondi Junction area. And let's hope that things go okay in Israel. That's it. See you next week. Bye.